Great morning, world. This is your boy Dragon, and welcome to another Rise Up with Dragon. I want to welcome everybody to the eye of the storm. Welcome to the playing field of your consciousness. This podcast's intention is to remove the blindfolds from your programmed mind so that you can gain access to higher levels of consciousness, as well as tap into your true great potential. How do we do this? We do this with our 10-minute straight to the punch deep thought podcast format, our weekly blog called The Dragon's Lair, One from the Vault, and our upcoming online courses and books. I want to welcome everybody to another Rise Up with Dragon.
Great morning, world! Welcome to the Rise Up with Dragon podcast with your host, Dragon!
Do you ever struggle with making decisions because you're so analytical? Well, one of the easiest ways to bypass your analytical mind, the shot caller in your mind, which by the way was trained by somebody else, is to access meditation as a tool. And that's why the sponsor for the Rise Up with Dragon, as always, is Karma Mind.
Get into the float state with Karma Mind meditations and gear.
So, hello, my friends. Welcome to another Rise Up with Dragon, Mondays and Fridays. Typically, unless we have a guest or something interesting happens, at 8:30 a.m. Streaming live for the sake of pushing me into an uncomfortable growth place. That's what I've been doing for so long. And we have hundreds of these now. As always, we always appreciate when you subscribe, rate, and review the Rise Up with Dragon podcast, the edited version, and that can be found on all the channels, specifically on iTunes. So today's Rise Up is called active action, and I can separate those two words, or I can put them together and just create a new word called active action. But first, I was thinking about this morning in my Dragon Thoughts part. Right now in our family, it's interesting to look at the challenging things that we do, and I think the premise that I'm always talking about in my podcast and all of the work that I do is it's not really the things that happen that we can control, but we can control how we react to them. So it's interesting to find myself right now going through what I would label as a tough time, right? Our family's going through a challenging time right now. And that's because somebody, a family member, very, very close to me, somebody that's just played a massive role in my life, is struggling. And, at that phase right now, and we're all just kind of like waiting around and trying to find out. And there's so many different things attached to that. But what I like to do, and I think a lot of people understand, this whole concept of experiencing loss. It's really tough. There's that tough time, going through a tough time. That's why, I always say, if you want to have a post go viral on your social media, just tell everybody you're having a tough time, and everybody comes, the prayer warriors, and everybody comes to assist you. And that's because everybody resonates with a tough time. But experiencing loss or pending loss is really, really challenging. It's a challenging one. So, one of the things that, and this is the focus that I wanted to offer you if you're going through one of those times, what's tough about is looking at what you're losing, right? Potential. That's where the sadness and the toughness is. But I like to flip a switch, and rather than look at what I'm losing, I like to look at what I gained, right? And that's that word legacy. What are people going to say that you've left behind when you pass? So one of the tools that I use in my interface response system, as I'm interfacing with this idea of loss, I like to flip a switch and just create a new perspective and ask myself what I've gained. So when I see somebody really, really sad because they've lost somebody, I like to ask them, tell me something wonderful that you gained from them in their life. What did they leave behind? What's their footprint? So I just wanted to share that with you if that's relevant to you right now. It's very relevant to me. And, this particular person, one of the things that I loved so much about her and she taught me, she always cheered for me, this amazing human. She always like complimented me and she always let me know that she was a fan of mine, always had my back and all that stuff. And so what I learned from that is, I mean, that was one of the values that she gave me, but what I learned is how important it is to impart that on other people, is to, cheer people on and let them feel safe to go and not be perfect and make mistakes. When they win, cheer them on, and when they lose, say, hey, that's okay. We'll recover from that. So anyway, I just wanted to pass that word #legacy onto you. It's what I'm trying to create before I go, which I don't know when that will be. So I'm going to work on it today as well. So those were my dragon thoughts. So let's talk a little bit about this idea of active action. So here's the question, do you procrastinate? Most people struggle with the commitment to do the consistent hard work that it takes to win at life. So this is why this is so hard for people to do the hard work. It's due to our inherent and programmed tendencies, meaning we learn them from someone else, to overanalyze, contemplate, and procrastinate. So let's face it, when God gave us this thing called free will, he also gave us options, or at least a perception of options, that we have the option to do or do not. And that's where contemplation lives. So that's a really, really interesting thing to look at, is, do you have those options? Well, if you've decided you do. So one of which of, those options would be to, as they say, dilly dally. So with some awareness of this, and that's what we're going to do right now, and a shift in your perspective, which is the first phase of the interface response system, I believe you can remove the shackles from your life and go into what I call active action. And it's probably not what you think it's going to be, because this is the Rise Up with Dragon show. So let's talk about the difference of activation versus action, right? And activity. Action and activity kind of go hand in hand. So the challenge is really in activating. And I want you to think about the time before you start, right? It's not starting, it's the time before you start. It's the perception and the contemplation of activating, the idea of starting. So that's the part that we contemplate. It's not the action and the activity. So we always talk about the hard work. You got to do the work with consistency, the hard work. And I think there's a perception that that's what you're afraid of, is doing the hard work. So that's the new perspective. It's not the action and the activity itself that's hard. It's the precursor, right? In fact, here's one thing I'll challenge you to think about if you've ever gone after something in your life. And once you're in action, with the activities, the high leverage activities that support your goal, you actually find out, this is what's interesting about action. We always think we need things before we go into action, but those things that you think you need before action, you actually develop while you're in action, like motivation, right? You don't have to be motivated to get in action. You get motivated from action. So it's not the action and activity itself, right? Those things start to get better, with the activities. So you find out that you're actually, when you're in action, you actually find out that you're in control when you're in action, because you're saying, I did this, I'm doing this. You're productive, way more productive in life, forward moving. And you actually, while you're in action and you're doing these activities, whether you set the marker wrong or not, like sometimes we set like the marker at the end of the day to see if we were successful. If your goal is to just be in action and leverage something, you actually find out that every day you produce more and more potential every step of the way. This concept of action potential, there's so many different ways of looking at it, but one of the things that I set as a goal every day is to increase my potential. And that's 100% in my control if I'm in action, right? So it feels great to be in action, even if you're working your butt off. If you're working your butt off and you're not feeling great about it, you might not be, doing the right thing. You might be doing something that you think somebody else wants you to do. But when you're in action towards your goals and your dreams, it feels great. So what's challenging is actually activating, right? Activating is the challenging part. So think about it for a second. This is forgive us for we know not what we do. We've been programmed like this. There's so many things and concepts that are out of our control that get in our way. So there's concepts of, this concept of fear of failure, fear of overwhelm. That's something that a lot of people miss, is fear of overwhelm, the fear of succeeding and at the expense of it being overwhelming and a burden. Fear of overwhelm and lack of self-worth. There's another one as well. These are things that get in the way of us activating. In fact, in addition, there are forms of learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is things that we've learned. We've learned from other people, and it's caused us to have this feeling of helplessness. So there's other forms of learned helplessness that build this gateless gate. It's a Buddhist term, this gateless gate between us and activation, right? This is that precursor before we actually get started. All you got to do is get started. When you hear these people say, sometimes actually it's like a meme. It's like one of those sound bites that people are using in their reels now. It's like, sometimes all you got to do is show up. I think it's Joe Rogan talking. So that's really, really important. And I just want to go over some of these forms. So 3 of these most common forms are this, right? One of them, and this is a concept that's attached to learned helplessness, right? In order for us to activate and start, we must believe in ourselves. So that is not true, but that is something that we believe. If you don't believe in yourself, you can't even get started. Another one is that we must be motivated, right? So we wake up and we assess, am I motivated? And if we're not, that gives you an excuse in that pre-activating stage to not do it, right? Believe in yourself and you have to be motivated. Not true. And then also one of the worst is that it has to be the right time in order to get started. So those are the most common reasons that we don't get started. So I'm going to challenge you right now. Think about what it is that you need to get started, right? And it's probably what you perceive as hard work, all right? But I'm just saying, what is it that you need to just get started, right? Because you're not going to succeed at it today. You're going to succeed at doing it, but you're not going to get the win. That's going to take time and consistency and discipline. But think about the thing that you're in contemplation of starting. Is today the right time? Is this morning the right time to do it? And I think that was where the motivation is, because coupled with a lot of challenges in my life, and this thing I shared with you about this challenging thing with experiencing loss and all that stuff. I think I woke up this morning recognizing that this was one of those really, really just inconvenient mornings for me to go do, to activate this morning with my routine and all that stuff. But because I've been working on all this stuff, I did it anyway, right? So that's what we need to work on. Good morning to you, whoever just said good morning. So how many will wake up? This is the idea. So if we need to believe in ourselves, we need to be motivated, and the timing needs to be right in order to activate. Here's the problem with that. So out of 365 days that you might be, I'm just giving you a hypothetical, might be gifted with ahead of you this year, starting today, how many of those days are you going to wake up feeling that it's the right time, feel motivated, and believe in yourself? Now, some of you might only think you need 1 or 2 of those, but most people think all those things. As a matter of fact, you look and assess. If one of those things is not present, that gives you the excuse to check out, right? And another thing I want you to think about is what happens when you check out? What happens when you take a day off of being in action, right? Activating and being in action. What happens then? Does the idea of taking a day off, is it about recuperation from you? That I understand. Or is it about regressing to a safe place? So just something else. But the idea is, out of 365 days, how many of those days are you going to have all the planets in line? Now, that should make you laugh. I mean, I was thinking about this. I really put some thought. How many out of 365 days do I wake up feeling like everything is perfect for me to succeed? Those learned helplessness concepts. I would say maybe about 10, and that would be in like a really, really good year. And what's funny is that on those 10 days that I perceived that I was motivated, timing was right, and I believed in myself, after all this work that I've done, my perception is that for some reason, I didn't pay attention, or I didn't see that there was, in fact, a complete shitstorm that was probably going on. I just didn't notice it. And I created this illusion that everything was perfect. I think that's why people do things like affirmations and practice the law of attraction. It's to create, and I like that. I did a podcast called Dear Mr. Fantasy, where I explained that you can create and control your fantasy. So I like the idea of creating this illusion that all of those things are in alignment. But if you really, really get to advanced work, you'll notice that good and bad are always omnipresent, right? Nothing's ever perfect. There's never a perfect time if you go by those rules to activate. So that is really, really important. That shitstorm is always there. So here's your challenge and your shift to play with today. And once again, you would have to activate and actually try it. Go through the motions as usual. Goal setting 101, right? Go through the motions as usual. Decide what it is that you want, why, etc. Right? You can't just look at something and say, I want this. It has to be harmonized with your brain and your heart, right? Why is this important? Go into the future and say, when I achieve this, what will be the value? What will change in my life? Connect it to the things that matter most, etc. Right? But once you've built enough why power around it and value around what it is that you want, I'd say you're ready. So ready to look at the consistent, this is the next step. You're ready to look at the consistent hard work needed to be done daily. That's the first thing you have to look at, is after you've set this goal and you've attached to something that really, really sexy that you'll fight for. The next thing is that you're going to look at the work, the stuff that you need to do to leverage it. So instead of all the bullshit fake work that you love doing, so you're going to look at that work that you need to do to leverage your in that contemplation. If you don't do that for whatever reason, and that's probably because you forgot about the value that you put on that goal. But if you don't decide to do that, what you're going to do is you're going to regress to that bullshit fake work, meaning work that doesn't move you forward, but it's comfortable and you love doing it. It's the easy stuff. Whatever you look at today as the easy stuff, that's not growth. It's the hard stuff. It's the stuff that's foreign to you. But when you do that, when you get in that, it's going to happen. You're going to contemplate, right? You're going to be in that pre-activation phase, and you're going to be offered that hall pass of contemplation because of, free will and learned helplessness. All these things are working, whether you believe it or not, right? Catch yourself going through that contemplation about starting now. Just catch yourself saying, okay, I can see that I'm bullshitting and I'm assessing, like, am I motivated? Do I believe in myself? Is the timing right? All of that stuff. Am I afraid? When I started this podcast today, because of everything that was going on, I experienced a little bit of angst. I'm going live and all that stuff. So I felt that, and I had my justification for in the contemplation, my justification for backing off, but I saw it and I caught myself, right? And I just decided to do it anyway, right? Just decided in that space because of my knowledge. Now I have experience, but I'm sharing this with you, my knowledge of pushing into that phase where you feel like you're just about to check out. Sometimes in life, we're like so close. We're like on the tip of our toes, getting ready to go into action. But we also notice in that time, if you're aware, you notice that you're also in contemplation of the concept of the option of backing off, right? So catch yourself right there and just try today to do it anyway. If you want to just have faith in this process and trust me, just do it anyway. Try it. Trust me on that. Because remember, once you're in action, you always feel better. It happens with exercise. It happens with eating right. It happens with drinking water. It happens with seeing that person, maybe a love interest or a business partner that you need to call. You always feel better on the other side of it. You know that, right? But catch yourself coming up with this forgetfulness of that stuff and in contemplation, and just do it anyway. Do that today. And then remember this message and this podcast, right? And just reflect back on it and let it sink in. Because if you keep on acting like that, this is the funny thing about being in active action. It never gets easy, right? I mean, I've been doing this for, like 16 years right now. It never gets easy. It does get easier, but it never gets easy. So on behalf of, all of the people that are out there waking up and pushing into the fear and the uncomfortable all the time, I can tell you the truth is you'll always have to work on it. So it's never easy, but it is easier. And the easier comes from the idea of knowing, from practicing it over and over and over again, what happens. So I'm really excited about a lot of upcoming things. If you're watching this live, you're gonna see pretty soon that I'm going to be interviewing the Anxiety MD. This guy's going to break down a whole different way of exposing what anxiety is, and it's very, very dragon. He's amazing. You're going to see that coming out soon. But just imagine if we just boil down anxiety and you get a new perception of it and a new set of tools to work with that. And the only person that doesn't experience anxiety is the person that just doesn't admit a whole bunch of things in life. Anyway, love and appreciate you. For those of you that are commenting, love you guys. Thanks so much for the feedback. I'm excited about what's to come. And just push into it today. Love you. Have a wonderful day.